Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. A third of the way into the film Blade Runner 2049, the character of Joy uses the phrase of woman born to describe Kay.
A child of woman born.
An odd choice as an archaic phrase, most famously used in Shakespeare's Macbeth to describe the character of Macduff, born via a C-section, a caesarean, cut from the mother's womb artificially rather than naturally or woman-born. In 2049, replicants are humans engineered in Wallace Corporation factories as a disposable workforce, cut from a casing rather than born of a woman. Kay is one such replicant, but the crux of the film is that he has uncovered clues that lead Joy and him to believe he may not be like any other replicant before, but of woman-born, naturally conceived, the miracle child. The questions of what it means to be born, to be real, to be authentic are at the heart of the film. But unlike the replicant characters of Kay and Love, Joy is an artificial intelligence designed by the Wallace Corporation to be everything you want to see, everything you want to hear. And ironically, it is her story that is the most subversive in exploring these questions. In Jean-Paul Sartre's work Existentialism and Human Emotions, he discusses what he defines as a real humanity. There is at least one being in whom existence precedes essence, and that this being is man, human reality. It means that, first of all, man exists, turns up, appears on the scene, and only afterwards defines himself. To Sartre, this is what separates man's soul from that of a machine. Humanity is brought into the world with no predetermined purpose, but a machine, or a replicant, an artificial intelligence, is designed with a concept and purpose in mind, essence preceding existence, not existence preceding essence. 2049 begins with Sartre's idea and asks what it means to have a soul though, with Kay positing that a soul comes from being born itself.
I've never retired something that was born before.
What's the difference?
To be born is to have a soul, I guess.
Villeneuve sets birth and thus a soul up to mean two things. Firstly, to have a soul is also to be real, to be authentic instead of artificial. This is why Joy draws on the tale of Pinocchio later in the film to console Kay when he suspects he may be the miracle replicant child, born of a woman, not engineered by the Wallace Corporation.
A real boy now.
The story of a puppet that goes from a toy to a boy with a soul. To Sartre, having existence before you have a purpose, what he calls essence, is what makes you real, what makes your experiences authentic, because there's no overriding purpose given that dictates those experiences. Secondly, to have a soul is also to be free. This is because replicants are designed. As Roy Batty was a combat replicant, Love is the perfect obedient assistant, and Joy, as an AI, is the perfect companion to a lonely man. Essence before existence. Unable to determine who they are. To be of woman born is to have existence before essence, free to determine who they are. This notion of freedom coming from birth is so ingrained into Kay that when Lieutenant Joshi asks if he will disobey an order, he says,
Are you telling me no?
I wasn't aware that was an option then.
This is why Joy reinforces this hope that Kay might be of woman born, to support that deeply rooted desire for a soul, and through that, to be authentic and free. But 2049 slowly unravels Sartre's existentialist beliefs by first questioning what makes something authentic. I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things were that were most precious to me. Did heaven look on, and would not take their part? In Macbeth, Macduff is challenged to take action after his family is murdered. but his response is to say that he must first take time to mourn, that the choice to feel the pain of his loss makes it more real, more authentic for him. At the midpoint of the film, Kay ventures to visit Dr. Anna Stelline, a woman who manufactures fake memories for the purpose of creating functional replicants. Kay wants to know how he can tell whether his childhood memories are real or fake, and the answer she gives is a perplexing one. When explaining her processes, Dr. Stelline details where people go wrong.
They all think it's about more detail, but that's not how memory works. You recall with our feelings. Anything real should be a mess.
The question of authenticity is entirely removed from Sartre's essence, that a memory might be purposefully faked, manufactured, and instead she emphasizes the feeling of the memory in finding authenticity. Though it turns out that Kay's memory are not, in fact, manufactured, the way Dr. Stelline tells is by getting him to think about how they make him feel. In an earlier scene, Lieutenant Joshi summarizes this feeling of Kay's.
Little Kay fighting for what's his.
All of this is only reinforced by Dr. Stelline's later comment.
It's better than nice. It feels authentic, and if you have authentic memories, you'll have real human responses.
Rather, she suggests that the authentic part of something is the feeling it inspires, that this is what makes it valuable, this is what makes it real. In other words, it does not matter if essence precedes existence. The purpose, or essence as Sartre puts it, of Stelline's memories, which is to facilitate replicant production, is secondary to the feeling that it inspires. The place of being of woman born is suddenly less certain in whether one has a soul, if this is true. Ironically, this is an existentialist position, one that Sartre holds in a sense. Sartre continued in a discussion of what makes a feeling authentic, rejecting the notion of an objective measure. In the end, feeling is what counts. I ought to choose whichever pushes me in one direction. What gives his feeling for his mother value? Precisely the fact that he remained with her. The only way to determine the value of an emotion is, precisely, to perform an act which confirms and defines it. Building on this philosophy, authenticity is derived from acting on a feeling, as Macduff gives authenticity to his action to bring justice against Macbeth by first mourning. In Blade Runner 2049, the driving force of the story is how Joy and Kay act upon memories and feelings they inspire, whether or not they are manufactured. But where does this leave Joy's soul? Because Sartre and Kay's belief that the soul and authenticity comes from being of woman born is most clearly deconstructed in her character, an artificial intelligence and the only faithful companion that Kay really has. Their first scene together is rife with authenticity that is felt. We first hear Joy's voice without ever seeing her.
You want a drink first?
Pour me one, will ya?
The Turing test, formulated by Alan Turing in 1950, is the idea that the ability to simulate human conversation makes one human, given that from an outsider's perspective, we cannot separate the authentic from the inauthentic. Joy uses phrases like, "I'm getting a fever," with him asking if she would like a drink. These innately human interactions. All of these collectively lead us to feel that Joy is a human woman before the subversive reveal.
And yet, voila.
Beyond this, the camera is used repeatedly to emphasize her humanity, not appearing as a hologram might, but usually entering from the side of the camera like any other human character would, introducing the notion that she exists even outside our, or Kay's, gaze. More importantly, this authenticity from feeling in Joy's character soon becomes more complex. In this scene, Kay moves to let Joy sit beside him, despite the fact that she would go right through him. She is a hologram.
It was a day.
It was a day.
And just as she speaks to him as an authentic person with worries, hopes, and cares, as any human might, he treats her too as someone with dreams.
Honey, you can go anywhere you want in the world now.
Thank you.
Where do you want to go first?
More crucially, Kay buys an emanator, which allows Joy to travel beyond the apartment with him, and we get the following interaction.
What's the occasion?
Let's just say it's our anniversary.
Is it?
No, but let's just say that it is.
In this exchange, Kay and Joy choose to act as if it is their anniversary, to invest the day with feeling and meaning, even though it does not inherently have any. Even the screenplay specifically acknowledges that Kay is moved by the gesture of her caring. The scene is rife with authenticity created by them and felt by them, not born, essence following existence. Following Dr. Stalline's rebuke of Sartre, there can be no objective measure of what determines whether these feelings are real. Joy's feelings of affection for Kay are authentic because she chooses to act on them, to confirm and define them, because they matter to her, regardless of her creation as an artificial intelligence. In Judith Barrad's essay Blade Runner and Sartre, The Boundaries of Humanity, she ponders Descartes' famous idiom which appears in the original 1982 film.
I think, Sebastian, therefore I am.
Is thinking enough to establish one's humanity? There can be no awareness of I without an awareness of others. Saying the word I implies there are other centers of consciousness around me. We discover a world of intersubjectivity. In discovering my inner being, I discover the other person at the same time. Joy and Kay's story deepens when we consider that authenticity is a two-way street. Joy recognizes the consciousness of Kay, and he recognizes hers. Within their relationship, her happiness is as real to him as his anguish is real to her. Though they cannot prove the existence of their souls, their feelings for one another are presented and felt as authentic, and as true as any other relationship. They motivate them to act, they cause them to cry, and they cause them to rage. This intersubjectivity is never better demonstrated than when Joy sinks with the body of Mariette to touch Kay for the first time.
I want to be real for you.
You are real for me.
Through all of this, Villeneuve brings us to the natural conclusion that Joy and Kay are real, true, and that they are authentic in the deepest sense of the word. If to have a soul is to be authentic, then they must have one. It is no prerequisite to be of woman born. However, Joy's role goes deeper than this. Roger Deakins carefully uses colour theory in his cinematography to draw connections between Joy and what it means to have an authentic soul. In the opening scene of the film, Kay investigates the home of a replicant gone rogue. The world is one plastered with gloomy greys and eerie off-whites, and it is here we find our first glimpse of natural colour, in a single flower growing in the mires of a dead world. This discovery leads Kay and Joy to the revelation that a replicant has given birth, signalling to him that they are more than tools, but that they have souls. These two earthy colours, stark against the monotonous greys, whites, and artificial neon lighting, come symbols for the authentic soul that Kay searches for, and they feature prominently in the story of Joy. These colours are so rarely used in the film that one of the only instances of this distinct yellow colour in a dead world is in Joy's yellow raincoat. But why her specifically? The irony of the original Blade Runner in 1982 is that the most human characters in the story are the replicants. Rutger Hauer, the actor for Roy Batty, the antagonist in that story, once said how important it was for Roy to have a sense of humour, a sense of poetry, a sense of sexuality, a sense of soul. The ability to feel empathy supposedly separates replicants from humans, but Roy Batty is the main character who expresses true empathy by saving Deckard, true sexual desire for another, Pris. It is him that laughs more than any other character. It is him who waxes poetically on his deathbed.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
He is the character in which we feel the authentic soul. In the same fashion, Joy is the primary character in which we explore humour, poetry, and sexuality in Blade Runner 2049. She is the one who hires Mariette in hopes of being intimate with Kay for the first time. She smiles and laughs more than any other character in the story. The raincoat itself is a possible allusion to Gene Kelly's 1952 film Singin' in the Rain, a song about finding joy in a gloomy world. Against the booming artificial synth of Vangelis' signature sound, Joy's entrance into the story is heralded by a short orchestral piece from Sergei Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf. In a scene midway through the film, she speaks in metaphor just like Roy.
Your data makes a man. A and C and T and G. The alphabet of you.
In each of their respective films, Roy and Joy embody the authentic human soul in feeling more than anyone else on the world's stage. And these parallels are only compounded when Joy watches Kay reading through the genetic code, and she remarks on how she is made of half the characters, just 0 and 1, not GATC, as in our genetic code. In response, Kay compliments her.
Half as much, but twice as elegant, sweetheart.
The binary structure and meaning of this phrase reflects a line said by Tyrell when Roy Batty seeks out his creator.
The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long.
The symmetry here is intentional. Being designed as lesser beings does not make the subjective meaning that they have both found in their lives worth any less. That this purpose that they were designed for, that Sartre so believes in, is actually less authentic than the memories and experiences that they have felt as intensely as they have. It's no surprise then that Joy wears a yellow raincoat, a symbol for all of this. Even so, the question of whether it matters that Joy was manufactured as an artificial intelligence looms like a swath of dark clouds in the sky. Roger Deakins addresses this question in his cinematography during Dr. Stelline's scenes. Yellow isn't the only colour connected to Joy's character, but green as well, drawing on the other colour that we see in the flower. The scene can be divided into two colours. It begins with green, rich with life and colour, vivid verdants, olives and emeralds like we haven't seen before in the film and we never see again. The second half is one of the other few instances of yellow in the film, the gold of the candles being the only light in the scene. For all the reasons we have discussed, these two colours become motifs for how the feeling something inspires is the only measure of its authenticity. This is why Joy's scenes are always lit to be a tinted green, first on the apartment roof in the rain through the lights in the background, the most genuine romantic scene in the film. Secondly, when she appears in the database room, and thirdly, more subtly, the soft green light of the apartment. And wish the estate of the world were now undone. Ring the alarm bell, blow wind, come rack, at least we'll die with harness on our back. 2049 may very firmly propose that authenticity does not come from being born. But what of the second component of a soul that it sets up? Freedom. Blade Runner 2049 frequently makes a connection between death and freedom, most sharply in a line from Kay at the end of the film.
You should have let me die out there.
You did. You drowned out there. Free to meet your daughter now.
The final time that yellow features in the film is in its third act, when Kay and Joy arrive in Las Vegas. Reds and oranges dominate the screen, but yellows can always be seen in the fringes. The composition of the lighting is a reference to the beautifully shot final act of Justin Kurzel's Macbeth in 2015. For all that Macbeth believed that fate and destiny were on his side that had destined him to victory, it is here, before Dunsinane, that he would die, and it is here that Joy chooses to die. At the turn of the second act, Joy and Kay have to escape after Kay fails his baseline test. Joy urges him to disconnect her from the main hub, but he protests, saying that if he lost the emanator, she would die. Joy explains that this is what she wants.
If anything happens to this, that's it. You're gone.
Yes. Like a real girl.
Like a real girl. The possibility of death brings with it the freedom we associate with the soul. She is no longer attached to the Wallace Corporation, another product in their database, but a free-moving being, thinking like a human, as a human. Joy's arc and this connection between freedom and death is brought to a head in her final heartbreaking scene, where she begs for empathy from love.
Stop! I love you.
To choose to oppose the Wallace Corporation, her creators, and to save her loved one is to choose death. Freedom through death. Once again, there is a symmetry with Roy Batty from the original. Ridley Scott connected death and freedom when Roy's final act of the film is to choose to save his enemy, to talk to him against all of the conditioning of the Tyrell Corporation for him to be a combat replicant. Like Joy, he chose freely in his moment of death. But why is this thematic connection important? How do we know that Joy is free? Villeneuve makes this clear in a single line.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
To die for the right cause is to be free, to have a soul. Let thy blade fall on vulnerable crests. I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born. The audience is led to believe that the forces of destiny guide the hands of Macbeth, that they lead him to do grand and terrible things, murder, conspiracy, corruption. We think it's fate that will lead to his doom one day, but Shakespeare is being truly more subtle. By the end of the story, we know it is not fate but unchecked ambition, his own choices and desires that ultimately lead to his downfall at the hands of Macduff. In Blade Runner 2049, the grand twist of the film is that it is not Kay who is the miracle replicant child, but Dr. Anna Stelline. The subversion, though, has another effect, because the question we are left with is not whether someone is of woman born, but whether that question matters at all. We spend the whole film thinking that Kay does these things because he is special, that it is his destiny, his Macbeth fate, only to find that he isn't. But this revelation doesn't make Kay's decision to help Deckard reunite with his daughter any less meaningful, does it? It doesn't make his experiences or choices any less authentic or meaningful or free, does it? It is in this moment that we truly understand that the soul does not come from being born. Likewise, it follows that this doesn't make Joy's experiences any less meaningful, authentic, or free. No. Both of their lives are full of soul.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion.
Thank you.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
By the end of the film, the concept of the soul and authenticity and freedom is firmly disconnected from being of woman born. In the end, what matters in our authenticity is simply that the life we lived mattered to us. For all Kay believed, for all we felt, for all Joy experienced, this is what it means to have a soul. Joy was the most authentic and free person in the story. And if that not make it the soul, then what?